Amy, I'm so excited to bring your bright light to this conversation today. So, welcome and thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I was excited to be here with you
Oh,
today.
thank you. You have spent so many years building your own businesses, from your own consulting business to building a nonprofit org and creating a podcast. It's honestly quite an empire. What was the driving force that steered you into creating these businesses? And
Oh, thank you.
did you have the idea to create these all at once, or did you consciously start with one idea that later influenced the others?
Yes, and yes, and yes. And thank you for asking me that question and for saying it's an empire because I always write that in my journal. Like, I want to have an empire. I want to have an empire. And you know how it never feels like you have that or you're doing that. But now when I can take a step back and look at all the facets, that is indeed what I am doing and want to do. But I would say that I started one and that kind of gave the impetus for the other, but it all started from the same root cause, if you will, is working in corporate America for a very long time and being married to my job and working constantly in advertising and media and being having a fantastic career there. I realized one day I had just left New York. I was living in LA. I moved to New York. I moved to San Francisco, and one day it hit me, like, what am I
Mhm.
doing? Why am I doing this? And that was probably 8 years ago now. And I remember I would listen in the mornings to inspirational conversations and whatever I had happened to pull up, and it said, "Do you want to be doing the same thing you're doing now 10 years from now?" And it was just a for me, not just, it was a visceral reaction, like, absolutely not. And so I quit my job without a job, and everyone thought I was crazy. Of course, my family, my friends are like, "Do you regret doing that? Like, how could you do that?" Because it was a high paying job and it was actually not that hard at that point anymore because, I was kind of on my own in a satellite office, and it was just not fulfilling. And so I think that's when I started to reimagine my life, and I had some thoughts about what now is my nonprofit, but I first started consulting. I started, okay, let me just do what I'm good at in my corporate
Yep.
career, but do it on my own and start taking on media companies as my clients. I did that for a while and then I got roped right back into working 24/7 for another company because they wanted me. And I'm like, okay, this is great. This is fun. But then I ended up feeling the same, like burnt out. So then I went back to my company. That's happened a couple times. So because we have those golden handcuffs, as we say, right? So it's easy to
Right.
get lured back in,
Right.
right? So but I very much keep being reminded that it's important for me and how I operate to be an entrepreneur, to do my own thing. Psychologically, it feels better. Now, I may not make that same amount in my paycheck, but I make more than that based on my freedom and my time, and kind of the sky is the limit as far as that goes. And then, yes, that allowed me space, Christina, to even think about creating a nonprofit where I didn't even have time before to think about that.
And it's what, lights you up, right? It's sort of a journey of self-discovery. And I know I'm currently going through that of corporate, and the
Hmm.
paycheck is security and stable, but what do we do with that? How do we expand and
Yes.
keep that light going? And how did you discover what actually lit you up? Because I think it's so easy to get caught up in the
Hmm.
mundane work life. Like you said, you were working constantly. How did
Hmm.
you take that pause and really think about what lights you up?
Yeah. And I have chills with you saying that. And also, I want to say, it isn't so stable anymore having the job in the corporate, America. Like, that isn't security anymore, right? We've really shifted away from that. So I think I had some foresight for whatever reason in that regard. But I would say once I started taking the time to slow down a little bit, start reimagining how I wanted my life, it did create this space to be like, okay, I'm meant to do more in the
Mhm.
world, more purpose driven work, and mission based work, whether that is in my media and in having my clients, but also I thought I want to give back. I want to help motivate and inspire youth, especially young girls, before they make life altering decisions. I have overcome adversity in my life, and I thought, okay, this is what. Right? This is
Mm.
what I'm meant to do, is to help share my story so I can help inspire people. And so that was very exciting notion to me. And so when you say light me up, that lights me up, but so does the way I've curated my entire life by having my own business so that I have the time, the freedom, and the flexibility. That really lights me up. And being able to help people and have meaningful conversations that aren't surface level, and being in meetings that don't matter. I'd
Right.
rather have my day to day life
Right.
matter to me and to others. Does that answer
Absolutely.
the question?
Absolutely. And I think
Okay.
for those that are listening to us and trying to figure out, okay, you knew that you wanted to make a difference and inspire others,
Hmm.
but how did you take that pause in your life and
Hmm.
say, how did you recognize that you actually had a light to do that? I mean, of course, we all want to inspire
Mm.
others. How did
Yeah.
you find that way? I think we're all on a path of
Yeah.
self discovery, and it's so hard to figure out what.
Yes, and I think I would say there's so many facets. I'm a very spiritual person, which now I can track that back to starting some self development work when I was 21 years old, and really implementing that in my life over the years. Which now I can have perspective and look back and see sort of the foundation I was creating in that regard, and making sure that I'm very self aware. Which even in the past few years is crystallized even more. So I think it's that realizing, I didn't know that that would inspire others, honestly, but now that I've done it and I see other people craving more for their lives, I see that it could be an inspiration and a motivation. Um, but yeah, it wasn't like I knew this was going to necessarily inspire others by creating that nonprofit, but it was something that I felt this internal pull towards. And I think in that self development work, everything, I've studied every modality and worked with therapists and coaches and all that. And really, in that process, I think when we lean into our own unique gifts and talents and trust ourselves, that's when the light shines, right? Instead of doing what everyone else tells us we should do. And that has taken some real trust in myself, right? And I've had to really practice that, because it's easy to lean on what other people think we should do. So I think a lot of it is that is what lights me up, that I get to do what I want. I mean, there's such power in that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Let's talk about your nonprofit for a second. Your Face It Today
Mhm.
organization, and it really focuses on empowerment for youth through self care while tackling self esteem
Mhm.
issues amongst those youth. And it inspires them to discover who they want to be. What do you wish you had more confidence to do in your youth? I know that I wish I could have held more capacity for compassion towards others. And really looking back, I wished
Mhm.
that I could have been more present. Back in high school, you think,
Mhm.
God, I can't wait to get out of high school. I just want to grow up. And then when you grow up, you look back and you say, I'm never going to get that opportunity back again to know those people. And it was such an influential part of our lives and of who we are today. A lot of the music and the fashion that we lived through when we were in high
Mhm.
school in our teens really impacts who we are as,
Or
right,
today.
exactly.
Mhm. It's so true, and I have chills as you're saying that, and it could almost make me emotional, because as I started diving into this work, it's really needed much younger. Girls as young as 8 years old start to lose self-esteem, which is heartbreaking to me, but it makes intuitive sense, logical sense, that once you start going to school and interacting and engaging with other kids, you notice the
Yeah.
differences in you, right? And you notice that not everything's the same. And so I think for me, um, I would have benefited from a company like mine or a mentor like me to come in and let me know that I was worthy, and using different words for for a young girl, but that I was pretty and smart, and that I could do whatever I wanted to do in this world, and it was okay to be unique if I wanted to
Right.
be. So if I would have had someone helping me and guiding me along that way, that would have been incredible to have like an unbiased, and my parents were amazing. They did the best they can. I really believe, most all of our parents do the absolute best they can, but having someone else come in that can see even
Hmm.
more, and I think that's it. It really is to help with that confidence and self esteem, and that's why I say with Face It Today, it's like choosing whatever you want. We can choose whatever we want, and whoever we want to be. It doesn't have to look like everyone else.
And that goes back to your whole mentality of your life and what you chose to do and leaving corporate
Hmm.
and really following what lights you
Oh,
up.
yes. Yes, and that feels good too because I've noticed now that as we sit here today, I can look back and see how I always sort of went steps ahead of myself, and I do things differently and just like a little bit ahead, right? Where now there's everyone, a lot of people are quitting to do this, and it's like, oh my god, yes, and I somehow had this sense before years ago to do it because it didn't feel right, and now I could help others.
Right.
And so, even in my work that I'm doing, business consulting and coaching that I've implemented more, it's so helpful that I'm like, no, you can do this. You can do whatever you want, even for adults. So, yes, youth needs it, but then also we need it so that we can be of service and to ourselves.
100%. 100%. I mean,
Hmm.
what do you feel has been most influential out of all the projects you've done to not only
Hmm.
yourself, but also others and the community?
I think honestly, when you say the most, I think standing in my own integrity and actually learning what that means and being okay with it. And like I mentioned earlier, it's taken me even until just the most recent 2 to 3 years to really implement that. And I think that would be my deeper work in some very unique study and human design and understanding that I truly do operate differently. We all do. And having compassion for self, less judgment for self, allows me to have that for other people and to stay in my lane. And me doing that allows other people to do the same. That's been life changing for me. And to have strength in that and not feel bad about it. I think I used to explain myself away like, oh, I'm doing this because of this, this, and this, and kind of sort of qualify everything or make excuses, not excuses, but it's over explained, and that's not necessary. And so I think that for me has been the most influential in my life, which now I see my gifts actually shine more so outwardly. So it's like this full circle.
Yes. I know I struggle with that. Self-judgment is, I'm so harsh on myself. I'm sure a
Oh,
lot of people can resonate with that,
oh,
right?
I think everybody, yeah, and it's like even like it's when I find myself doing that or feeling bitter or out of alignment, I have to remind myself it's all a journey, right? We're all on our own path and process and timing, and it starts to click when it's meant to.
Exactly. Let's talk about your human design for a second.
Hmm.
You mentioned human design. Can you explain to us
Hmm.
what does that mean? How do you go about doing that? What and how did you discover
Oh,
yourself within
okay.
that?
So, okay, so a quick story is I was doing another sort of deep healing work in Los Angeles, and where I would go every day for a week and do some intense healing, and I was introduced to human design from that particular healer, and he told me I was a projector, and in society we hear when you project it's a negative thing, and I thought immediately, I'm like, what do you mean? Like, how could I be a projector? That doesn't make sense. And so I was so fascinated by this concept. So I started to dig into it myself. I started studying human design. And so human design is really the practice of deconditioning who we were told we were supposed to be when we
Mhm.
came into the world from our parents, our teachers, religion, society. And it's the deconditioning process to get back to who we truly are and are letting our unique gifts and talents shine and living a life of ease and flow. And so I did two certification trainings in this. I am what's called the projector in human design, and we're very fascinated with human behavior. So I always have been, and this has given me a voice to actually be like, no, this is truly who I am. It is my sort of makeup. And so it's a fantastic it's made up of I Ching, Kabbalah, the chakra system, astrology, and in science,
Okay.
quantum physics. So it's a real precise sort of modality. And everyone I talk about it with, it resonates with them so much and they feel so seen and heard. And so that's been the latest thing that I've done. Again, that's been completely life changing.
And how do you go about, like, if someone were to approach you and say, I want a human design reading, how would you go about
Oh, yes.
doing that?
So I have that. So on my website, purposefulsolutions.net, I offer that. So I have my business consulting, my one-on-one coaching. We can do one-on-one human design readings. I'm having group work right now, which is really great because people are craving more and more of this as we move forward. As you're saying, changing and kind of making changes for ourselves. And actually, what you said earlier is like, how do you know what's the right thing for you? So this is a really great tool in helping you understand your purpose. And so I'll do readings for people. I just had hosted a workshop this past weekend and talking about a portion of it because it is a lot to learn. So we kind of take baby steps into it, but yeah, people can look at on my website and book readings, and there's a couple other resources that I would recommend from people I have done my certifications under.
Oh, interesting. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah,
And it's sort of,
it
it
is.
must be related to coaching as well, right? Because if you do a human design reading, it
Yeah.
helps you sort of help the person coach them into what may be their best path and what might
Yes,
light them up.
everything. I won't. Yeah, and Christina, it's with coaching, it's also with my business. I don't work with anyone unless I understand their human design. So it really is woven into my entire life. And it's completely changed dynamics, even with my daughter and I, we both operate very differently. I wish I would have known this when she was much younger. It's wonderful for people to understand, and then for any relationships you have in your life, or if you do have children, because we aren't meant to all operate the same or communicate the same. And so it's a very important to, again, have acceptance for others in that way. And so where maybe as a parent in the past, I may have had these unrealistic expectations where now it's like, okay, you're not meant to do things the way I would do them. We know that logically, but it's really great to understand that based in a science and this experiment of human design. So,
Right. Which, going back to the youth empowerment, if we had known
mm,
what we know
yeah.
now and had the tools, I mean, no one even talked about that stuff,
Mm-mm.
and
No,
as a teen,
no, exactly.
I feel like teens are just, oh, we know everything. We don't want to talk to our
Yeah.
parents. We don't, and so it's a very natural thing. And there wasn't anything coaching or any of that.
Not for us. Not for us. Now, the younger generations inspire me so much because things are changing big
Right.
time. Like our generation is definitely seeking information in these different modalities. The younger generations, it's mandatory for them. And they are talking about mental health and they aren't going to do things the way we are. And their measures of success are different than ours. And it's really time to change. And we're seeing that happening very, very quickly. And so I appreciate that they're operating the way they are. But yeah, we didn't have a lot of that. And now it's like, it's just necessary. We did with our nonprofit, we do some work in high schools. And I did offer that, the human design, because it is important so that they can understand and articulate what they're good at. And so, anyway, so yeah, it is that is definitely threaded throughout everything I do.
That's amazing. And just talking about, I mean,
Yeah.
you do so much to help others. Again, it's like you mentioned, that's what lights you up. What would you
Yeah.
say the single most important change that you've noticed with your life and in yourself, going from corporate to
Yeah.
all of these different entities?
Okay. Yeah, I think the most important thing for me is that I am not meant to be like a hustler, right? And I got a lot of accolades for doing that because I built my career and I did, was just working, working, working so hard and I burnt myself out. So the most beautiful thing that I have shifted for me is that I'm meant to curate this life I love that brings me joy. Maybe I'm extremely efficient, maybe work for 3 hours and then do some other things that bring me joy, go to Pilates, go for a walk, visit with friends, have connections. So these are the most important things that I've started to implement into my life that allows me to be more successful, to be more productive. And it does take a lot of trust. I did not believe that at first. I was like, no, I have to force these things, and I'm not meant to force. And so I would say that's been huge, Christina. So I'm very grateful, and continue to lean into trusting that.
That is
Does that answer your question?
absolutely. And I would say for an
Okay.
outsider admiring you, or really anyone sort of leaving corporate, doing their own thing and doing so
Mm.
many things. I mean, we're talking about coaching, consulting,
Mhm.
you do the nonprofit, you do the podcast. I would define that as hustling. So to
Okay,
say
and so that's what I was just going to say to you. Oh, I did, and just in the workshop I gave on Saturday, I was like, I was giving that example of, I'm not meant to hustle. Now, I still do everything I love. I do it in a different way. So those are things I'm curating, I'm choosing to do. I still work with media clients. It's the way I articulate how I'm going to work with them. It's a shift. It's these tiny shifts that we all do. We don't need to make these massive big changes. It's little shifts, and in communication, in articulating, hey, like, so for example, with a client, a large media company, they're telling me what they want me to do. And so I'll come back and say, here's where my talents lie best. And here's what I could do that is going to actually help serve your company. It's a very different way, where before it's like, oh, okay, like, let me do whatever you want so that I could sign this. So it's still, yes, a lot of different things, but I also need the right people. Like, I operate well with a small
mm,
team. So I know now the right types of people to pull in that are going to complement, like, our energies are going to complement each other.
that's amazing. That's
Mm.
amazing. So even if you're not, I mean, you're still
Yeah, and
hustling, but you're being very what's the word?
intentional. It's
Intentional.
it's a different. Yeah,
Intentional with
yeah,
what you're
it is.
choosing to
It
do.
yeah, I would have never known what that even meant if someone would have told me years ago, like, "Oh, just be intentional about what you're doing." It takes a lot of practice, and, like I said, trust, because it's scary. It's scary to make a
Well, I
change
think
to, like, actually.
that's the key, intentional. That
Yeah,
is the key for
yeah.
anyone listening that wants to find what they want to do and just look for things that light them up and be intentional about how they spend their time,
Mm.
right?
Yes, and really understand, like, not always worrying about the how, but the what and the why, like, what is important to you,
Right.
right? And I think, and we know so many people and friends that talk about things they want to do, but they never will because of fear, right? Our own limiting beliefs and our own fears that hold us back from playing big. Well, again, we're meant to be here to do whatever we want. We're not here for that long. It's like, why wouldn't we
That
do
is
what we want
that
to
is
do?
so true. I struggle with that too. It's like we're not
Mhm.
here for that long. Why am I so scared to start this
Mhm.
one thing? And
We have a little blip of time here, so
right,
it's like that always comes back to me. I'm like, okay, so why wouldn't
right.
I? If I only am here for this short period of time, I can do anything I want to do, just like anyone else could.
Exactly. Absolutely. And stemming from thinking about who's listening out there, there's a lot of us that are
Mhm.
in corporate, are not happy. And I think now more than ever, it's such an important time to be having our conversation. There's been so much upheaval
Yes.
within the corporate world over the last couple of years, between furloughs, from COVID to layoffs to the new trend, quiet quitting. I think people are just exhausted, right? A lot of us are now questioning,
Mhm.
why am I doing this? Or what is it for? Or how can I do better? And I think those questions are what is driving the change we are seeing in today in our culture. What advice would you have for someone who is really wanting to leave their corporate job, but they either don't have any
Mhm.
idea what they want to do, but they just know that they want to change?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that I would ask them why they want to leave, because I do think there's nothing wrong with corporate if that works for you. I know lots of people who appreciate the structure. They need the structure. I don't. I'm very much an entrepreneur. A lot of people need it. So I would first ask why. Like, what is it about it that's not working for you? Because often I talk to so many people that could speak up and have a conversation internally and change the dynamic for themselves. And it could be just that, and they might be happier staying, right? So I would ask the why, like, what is it and what are the things that excite you? And really going through that self-discovery process, you really can't make a change like that until you start understanding why, like what works for you here and what doesn't.
Right.
So I think that's really important. And if then you absolutely know it's not right, then start taking the steps to what is going to be next for you. Do you need to take time off? Are you able to take time off financially? Are you willing to take a leap, a risk? So everyone's so different in that. So that's what I would just start to ask questions and really go deep to and get to the bottom of what lights them up,
And what I find is
right?
sometimes our friends and people in our community recognize what we might be good at and we don't even recognize it. So
Mhm.
maybe say yes to something that someone might ask you to do because you might discover
Yes.
something about yourself that maybe what you like to do or
Yes.
what lights you up, literally,
It's so true.
right?
It's so true because there's so many people that I know that'll be like, "No, that's not for me. That's not me." I'm like, "Well, have you ever done it?" No. So it's like, well, why wouldn't you try? Like, it's a small example. Like a friend of mine was like, I would try to get her to go to yoga. And she's like, Amy, I am not flexible. I'm like, well, because you don't go to yoga. Like, what do you mean?
Right.
And so now she's super into it. And so I remind her of that. So it's like saying yes more. And I always use this example too. If it's not going to hurt you, right? Do it.
Right.
It's if it's not, you're not putting yourself in harm or other people in harm, because I think especially now people have a lot of anxiety coming out of COVID. I mean, that is hugely prevalent with not only kids and teenagers, but adults, I'm noticing. And so I have to have that conversation with some people, like, okay, if you know it's people you trust, let them call you out, bring you out to be social. You know it's not going to hurt you. They only have your well being in mind. Otherwise, it's easy to stay home and just say
Right.
no. A lot of people are doing that right now. So,
Exactly. Exactly. Just try new things.
mhm. So I love that.
Love it.
Yeah, I love that.
Awesome. Well, Amy, thank you so much for coming on the show. And can you tell us
Yes,
all,
so fun. I love this conversation,
isn't
Christina.
it so? It's just, it lights us all up. I hope it's lighting everyone up.
Yes,
And
I could talk about it all day long.
can you tell everyone where they can find you, how they can follow
Mhm.
along, or if they want a human design reading or coaching?
Yeah, I think the best is the purposefulsolutions.net. And if you want to put that in the show notes, people are more than welcome to reach out. I am the first to admit I am not great about social media. It does not make me feel good. So I'm really trying hard to honor that. So I really am about my small network, and meeting people through things like this is how I show up the best. And so I think that is, they could come to my website and reach out through that way. I'm always on there. I'm always connecting with people through that way.
Great. And the Face It org? Are you still active
Yeah,
with that? Okay.
faceittoday.org. Yeah, faceittoday.org. And we have the Face It podcast. My daughter and I do that podcast, talking to people who've overcome any sort of major adversity or challenge in life and how they've come out the other side to help inspire and motivate others. So that is on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and you could reach us on the site there as
We
well.
didn't even talk about the podcast.
Oh yeah, that's okay. I mean, yeah, it's like, yeah, I just did. That's been really fun. We started it last year and had a year's worth of episodes. And now we'll do it when it feels right. We don't have this very strict schedule, I think I was sharing with you. And so it feels good. We were just talking about, it's my daughter and I that do it together and have wonderful guests come
Mhm.
on. And we're sort of reimagining those conversations, but that's been a journey too, and learning and talking. And that's what I've noticed. Like, I enjoy talking and saying things out loud because then that helps inspire me
Right.
as we're having these conversations. So,
Exactly. Exactly. Well,
mhm.
great. Well, thank you so much for coming on and having this
Thank
conversation.
you. Yes.